Okay, it is 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Resume Basics, which is part of our Get That Job webinar series here at the Champaign Public Library. My name is Jordan Neal, and I am the Career Librarian here at the library and your presenter for today. So thank you all for joining us. Before I get started, I wanted to mention some library information that we will reiterate at the end of the webinar, as well as some webinar details. So for the latest library news and updates, please visit our website, champaign.org, for more information, or you can follow us on social media if that's an option for you. We are pleased to announce that the library will reopen on Monday, February 1st for grab and go service and computer use. Once again, please visit our website for more information, or of course you can give us a call, or you can email us at librarian@champaign.org, or you can chat with us just by visiting the homepage of our website. We are still offering our Book a Librarian service virtually. If you need any help at home, to request a session, visit champaign.org/bookalibrarian to fill out a request form. We are still going to be offering our curbside services if you would prefer to come, or if you prefer not to come inside the library. And then finally, our e-library is always open 24/7, where you can enjoy ebooks, movies, and more using your Champaign Public Library card, or you can sign up for a virtual library card through our website for instant access. Finally, I'd like to briefly go over a few Zoom features available to you that might help during this particular webinar. Depending on your computer or device, if you take a look at your Zoom window, you can hopefully see audio settings at the bottom left of the screen. You can adjust your audio settings, like changing your speaker or by clicking or tapping on the upward arrow next to your speaker. Moving to the center bottom of your screen, you will see a chat and raised hand option. Clicking on the chat will open or close a chat box on the right side of your Zoom window, or sometimes it displays on the middle of your screen, and you can just drag it around, again, depending on your computer or device. You also have the option to raise hand to receive assistance. You can use this if you have any technical difficulties, or you'd like to speak and ask a question if you'd prefer not to type into the chat. We invite you to use the chat or raised hand option to ask questions or leave any comments. I'll be sure to pause throughout the presentation for any questions as I present. I would also like to remind you all that webinars are recorded, so please just be mindful when you're asking those questions or sharing those comments. So as I mentioned earlier, I am the career librarian here at the Champaign Public Library. Besides these webinars and workshops, I also help people one-on-one with their career-related needs. So if you need any help with your resume, your cover letter, or even a practice interview, you can contact me and I would be happy to help. I'll be sure to have my contact information at the end of the presentation. So yeah, perhaps you're creating or revising your resume. I know that I'm always making adjustments to my resume. So in this webinar, I will discuss some resume basics and general suggestions, as well as some library resources. This webinar certainly won't cover all the elements related to creating or revising your resume, but hopefully it will be enough to get you started. Library staff, most likely myself, would be happy to connect you with more in-depth resources. And again, I'll share my contact information here. First off, I wanted to say there is no right way to write a resume. Your content will be individual to your experience. So just focus on presenting yourself the best way that you can professionally. Like I said, I'm going to try my best to relay what might help you get started, but again, just focus on presenting what highlights your experiences and your skills. There are several sections included within this presentation, so I'll be sure, like I said, to pause after each section for any questions. I finally wanted to mention that this is very general information to help you get started with your resume, and it's not going to be specific to any industry or employer. So please tailor your resume to the job, position, and your situation. So we'll first start with why you might need a resume. Some employers require a resume and some don't, but it doesn't hurt to have a resume ready for any opportunity. I know from our experiences here at the library that, sometimes someone is just so excited to apply for a job and it asks for a resume and, they might not have one readily available, or we have to create one really quickly just to apply for a job. So again, might be helpful to have one ready, especially when that you took the time to professionally polish. Essentially a resume is like a professional summary. Before a prospective employer can hear you or even see you, they might see your resume first. You ultimately, want to secure an interview, so you want to make the best first impression that you can through your resume or your cover letter. So before you start your resume, here are just a few thoughts to keep in mind. Consider taking the time now just to check in, or evaluate yourself professionally, your strengths, any opportunities for improvement, review your, previous annual evaluations if you have any copies of those, any professional development records, any continuing education, and especially any accomplishments. Now might be a great time to establish or connect or reconnect with your professional references. Do you still have their current contact information? Are they still willing to even serve as a reference for you? Perhaps you might need some new references if you're exploring a new industry. So again, now might just be a good time to catch up in general. So then I would consider creating or adding this information to just a master list of your entire professional experience to serve as a reference when you're applying for positions. This would be separate from your resume. It would just be kind of a helpful historical reference when you're applying for jobs. So for example, I have a document of my entire professional experience just to help me remember some of the details. Because just realize or recognize, that your resume is not going to be a one-size-fits-all document. You should be customizing and tailoring your resume per the position that you're applying for. For example, you would use keywords found within the position description when you're applying for that particular position. And then you finally want to ensure that you include not just your technical skill sets, but some of the transferable skills that you carry with you regardless of the position or the industry. And not just for your resume, but these skills will, would probably be discussed if you were granted an interview. So for example, think of how you demonstrated any teamwork, things like that. And again, I will talk about some of those transferable skills in a little bit here. So how should you create your resume? It's going to be up to you, but you could easily start from scratch. You could utilize templates, of course. You can connect with state resources like, Illinois JobLink, or federal resources like Career One Stop, which is actually sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor. For example, I really like their resume guide because it will walk you through the steps of writing a resume and just provide some really great templates. By visiting the online tools portion of the library website, you could also access library resources for templates and other great information such as Gale Courses, JobNow, LinkedIn Learning, or Peterson's Test Prep. And I'll be sure to discuss those resources in a bit too. There are just so many resources for resumes. These are just a few. I acknowledge there are also employment sites like Indeed and Simply Hired. They also have great resume builders that I believe you can export to Word or a PDF document. But however you arrive at your final resume draft for a job application, just keep in mind that you ultimately want to create a resume, that reflects, again, your experience and your skills, as you tailor to each opportunity and employer, so they decide to grant you that interview. So I'm going to briefly discuss the types of resumes that you might hear about. However, I must just reiterate my statement about the right way to write a resume. There is no right way, including labeling the type of resume that you're writing. What matters is how you're highlighting yourself in the best light possible, regardless of resume type or style. I'm mentioning these because if you decide to use a template, these are some of the most common resume types that you might see labeled even within some of our library resources. So starting with a chronological resume, this is simply just one of the most traditional or standard resume types out there. And what I mean by traditional or standard is and I say this frequently, is that resume reviewing can be subjective. Employers have a certain anticipation and expectation when they are receiving resumes, including formatting. So although a chronological resume won't specifically be listed within the job application requirements, employers are sometimes looking for that work history and experience, and a chronological resume can help reflect that. And it just simply helps you document kind of a steady and strong work history if you can demonstrate that within your resume. So for example, I use this example all the time, but I started here at the library shelving books, and I kind of worked my way up to a librarian position. So if I apply for future library positions, I'll be sure to include that strong and steady work history that is hopefully very relevant to a library position. Moving on to a functional resume. So not everyone can or wants to state a consistent work history. So you might want to focus on your skills instead. You can even list these first within your resume, and this is when you would use a functional resume. Instead of starting off with your work history, you would perhaps start off with a skill section or qualifications section. And again, this might be for people who don't necessarily have the work history, or like recent graduates, new job seekers, or those with gaps in their employment history. Instead of a work history, you could highlight relevant courses you took in school, or any training you took while you were changing careers, or during any gaps in your employment history. I also mention frequently that I'm also a registered nurse besides being a librarian, and so when I was applying for those nursing positions, as a new nurse, I was nervous that, my skill set wouldn't compare to a more veteran nurse. But I realized, and I share this all the time with new graduates, that I was actually a considerable, I was also a competitive candidate because, I had recently learned and acquired some of those skills fresh from an accredited agency. I knew some of the most recent evidence-based practices, as they say in the medical world, and they were just fresh in my mind from my academic studies, whereas, a nurse with a longer professional history, of course, has wonderful experience, but perhaps their continuing education isn't as fresh from a clinical instructor as I had just had. So just different way to look at it. Finally, we have the non-traditional or creative resumes. These are the ones that you might see out there with images and infographics. Those people need to relay some of their visual talents. And I'll talk about this more on how you can relate this to a resume, but depending on the field, sometimes this resume is sought out and accepted by employers. Most of the time at the public library, I'm helping people with a chronological or functional resume, but again, these are just labels. The focus should be on how you're highlighting yourself and actually getting the hiring manager's attention and securing an interview and relaying how you can help their organization succeed. And I'd be happy to send you some of these examples after the webinar as well. So any questions at this point? I don't think so, so I'll keep on going. So moving on to some content suggestions, starting with your contact information. Make sure that your contact information is correct and it is current. Just as we discussed with references, has your phone number changed or your email address changed? Do you still have access to that email address and that phone number? Not even spell check can, correct an incorrect digit within your phone number or a letter within your email address. We recommend sticking with simple headers and using brief descriptions, especially focusing on your accomplishments and highlights. Start with strong action-based words such as managed, coordinated, maintained, implemented, things like that. I would avoid paragraphs just for easier reading and just don't overwhelm the reader. And I would minimize any abbreviations and career jargon unless you're, guaranteed that the employer or recruiter is familiar with some of these terms. I would try to avoid starting out with I. So instead of saying I managed, you would just say managed and then your statement there. And I was also going to say it depends on the field as well, going back to that jargon. So like I said, I was a nurse and there are, some tried and true medical terms that people would know. So again, just it depends on the position. And if you're not familiar, if you're not sure if they're familiar with the jargon, I would just literally write it out for them or spell it out. And then finally, just focus on the employer. Yes, benefits and salaries, those are important, but, how can you help that employer, and fulfill the needs of not just the employer, but of the position. Just consider their perspective. So moving on to formatting, just attempt to keep a basic format. And what I mean by this is just including again, easy to read text. So just be mindful of which font and size that you're using. Make sure that everything looks consistent. So for example, are you abbreviating once or are you just writing them out? Depending on the font, I would stick with the font text size of 11 to 14. You could try to go as low as 10, but that might be harder to read, again, depending on the font. And then for the actual font, just to be honest here, there are so many, conflicting messages out there on which one to use. I would stick with a basic, easy to read font like Arial. And I also think some sources mention, that something like Times New Roman is outdated or something, and sometimes, actually clashes with some resume scanning systems, which I'll talk about those in just a bit. But I have to be honest, I've used Times New Roman and it's worked for me. So I mentioned here, except for your name, because most people enlarge and bold their first and last name on a resume. Usually it's double the size of the text compared to the rest of the document. So if the majority of your resume is at a 12-point font, I would make my name in a 24-point font. And again, it's just about, employer anticipation and expectation. And I'll be sure to show you some examples here soon. And before your resume gets into the hands of a hiring manager, it might go through an applicant tracking system or resume scanning software. Again, I'll talk about those in in a few slides here. But using some keywords found in the job description can help you make it through this system. But there are also some aspects to avoid when creating your resume, such as certain types of coloring, layouts, and images. And like I said, resume reviewing can be subjective. As a hiring manager, recruiter already has an expectation, for certain information to appear and in a certain area. I'm not trying to discourage anyone from being creative, but just consider adding anything creative to like an online portfolio and maybe adding the link to your resume. Make sure that your resume is free of errors. Have someone, of course, take a look if you have that option. I would try to stick with 1 to 2 pages, but that just really depends on the experience and the position. And just also remember that a resume is going to be different than a CV. So when you're applying for jobs, just make sure to check that the employer had what they are requiring or they're requesting. Finally, if you are submitting a hard copy of a resume, try to use some nice heavy resume paper, but most days here at the library, we're helping people usually upload a resume to an online application or web portal. And if that's the case, just be mindful of what file type is being accepted. Like some employers use Windows, some use Macs. Keep that in mind, for example, if you're using Pages to write your resume, because you're at the mercy of not just your processing program, but the employers. Sometimes I recommend, if you want to prevent your formatting or your layout and your other content from being compromised, I suggest saving and uploading as a PDF file, or I think it's portable document format. I think that's what it stands for. It's just one of the most universal document types out there and just kind of ensures control over your content and prevent some undesired changes when someone opens up your document. And it's like an image. It will just stay the way you want it. It will open up the way you want it to be opened up for the employer. And they won't have to exert any additional effort just to read your resume. And again, there's so much conflicting information out there that sometimes says use PDF, don't use PDF. I've used a PDF and it's worked for me. But again, just look at what the application requirements say. So as I mentioned earlier, before your resume gets into the hands of a hiring manager, it might go through an applicant tracking system or resume scanning software. These systems are essentially designed to save recruiters time to find optimal resumes and ultimately viable candidates. Among other functions, sometimes they collect they of course collect and sort through hundreds of resumes based on ideal qualifications. Sometimes they help employers stay compliant of employment laws, and they have certain guidelines. Sometimes they rank resumes for employers, and of course all of them are not the same, but I just wanted to mention some general guidelines to keep in mind to get you through most of these systems, but again, some companies might not even use them. And again, I keep on saying this, and I'll have to keep on repeating myself, but using keywords found in the job description can help you make it through, not only through the systems, but kind of aligning yourself with what the employer is looking for and their company culture. You know, someone at some point, a human being has programmed those keywords into that system. So it would help, again, just align yourself with what they're looking for, and ultimately, and hopefully connecting with a hiring team. Keeping your work history and dates consistent might also help you get through some of these systems, and using simple and standard headers like professional experience or education instead of unique headers like more about me or get to know me or things like that. And like I said, because resume reviewing is subjective, they just have certain expectations for what they're looking for. You know, you don't have a whole lot of time for an employer to be looking at your resume, so don't try to make them work to find your information. And like I said before, there are some aspects to avoid, like certain adding coloring or layouts or images. You know, sometimes the software just can't compute it, and your resume might not make it to the recruiter or the hiring manager. And once again, so please submit your resume according to the application guidelines. Not all resume scanning software are the same. Sometimes it is a human being reviewing your resume. So maybe just save it, again, per application requirements, or maybe as a doc file or a PDF. So any questions at this point? Okay, great. We'll move forward. So I'm going to start talking about different areas of a resume. You know, resumes can include all types of sections, but I'm going to just focus on sections that we see frequently on most resumes, and what I see on a lot of library customers' resumes. So the resume example I'm going to use for this presentation is one borrowed from Career One Stop, the resource I mentioned earlier. This resume represents Krista Brown, who is a certified nursing assistant, or a CNA. I'll speak to the other content specifics in just a bit, but for now I'm going to use her resume as a visual guide as I discuss some of the different sections. So you don't have to digest everything just yet, and once again, I'll be sure to send some of these examples out later. So Krista actually has a 2-page resume, so I'm going to be sharing the second page as a visual reference, and then I'll move on to some of the individual sections. So first I'm going to start discussing the objective or summary section of the resume, which is usually found at the top of a resume below someone's name and contact information. So besides your header information that usually includes your name, your contact information, some people include an objective or summary as the official start of their resume. I'll show you some examples here in a moment, but when we help customers here at the library, this is usually an area that we see included within a lot of resumes. You don't have to include it, but I do want to mention a few things here, especially since it might be one of the first things that a prospective employer might see, because resume reading is usually top down. So essentially, an objective is usually just a one-sentence statement that lists what you're hoping to obtain, whereas a profile or summary statement includes a few more sentences, including, you know, the most important part, the benefit to the employers. So what's usually included within an objective statement is what I said previously, you know, what you're hoping to obtain, and usually the position, title, or job field. It sometimes includes the position level or even the name of the company. So here are some examples of objective statements. So once again, it's important to know, what you want and to state your professional goals, but it's really important to relay what the benefit is for the employer. These statements are okay, but they, I think, are missing the benefit to the employer and how your qualifications can help them. Your resume, especially at the beginning, should be focused, on marketing what you can offer the employer. So this leads up to a profile or summary statement. I've heard it called both, so I'm just going to include both for now. Once again, prospective employers, would like to know how your qualifications can help them. You should be using strong keywords to describe your qualifications and your value to a potential employer, rather than telling them what you want from them or what you hope to gain. This could include, but of course not be limited to, relevant experience, but transferable skills. I'll talk about those in just a bit here, and just your best personal and professional qualities. So the takeaway here is to not only relay a current understanding of what the actual job is, but what you hope to give and not necessarily what you hope to get. Just focus on a few brief and memorable sentences that just articulate the best things that you can bring to an employer. So the next couple of slides show a couple of examples here. So this first one here mentions, I'll read the first one, but not the second. A tactical, innovative, hands-on educator with on-the-ground and online teaching experience in a collegiate, public and nonprofit environment, expertise working with students from kindergarten to college, particularly those with educational and environmental challenges, skilled in numerous teaching and assessment strategies that create an interactive learning environment and engage students through active participations and real-life examples. And then let's see, I think another example here. Yes, here's another example. I won't read the whole thing, but I do like they mention some measurables here. They quantify some things about their experience. They mention specific softwares that they're using that might be relevant to the position. But again, the takeaway is just those brief and memorable sentences that highlight what you bring to the table. Both of these might be actually a little bit long for my taste, but the point is an objective statement might not be sufficient enough compared to what other candidates are stating within their resume. So just to summarize, objective statements say, this is what I want, whereas a profile or summary statement say, this is what I can offer you. You can choose whatever you feel is best for you, but just think about how you can successfully connect with an employer to secure an interview. So any questions at this point? All right, we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, so the next section I'll talk about is the professional experience area, which can be presented in a variety of ways as we see here. So your resume will probably have maybe have a summary area, an education level, or maybe even a skills area, but your work or professional experience is going to be one of the most significant areas of a resume. Again, it's about, employer anticipation and expectation. Most employers expect to see your experience in reverse chronological order. That is, your most recent experience first underneath the heading. Make sure to include the name of the company, location, dates, employees, and brief descriptions of your roles and your responsibilities, but especially your accomplishments, just to, again, help you set you apart from other applicants. Try to address what is asked for in the application and relevant to the position. And just remember, you might not include every job or professional experience within your resume. So when thinking about some of those roles and those responsibilities and your accomplishments, briefly describe the highlights and what an employer is hoping to see. What, again, sets you apart from other candidates. Avoid listing out every detail. Try also avoid listing out items that's already expected within the industry, but just the items that will stand out to the employer. For your accomplishments, think again about how you're different from the rest and what showcases your skills and your potential. Again, accomplishments can really help set you apart from everyone else. It's not just what you did, but how well you did it. When reviewing material for your master copy, for your professional experience or for your resume, these are just some additional items to review when considering some of your accomplishments. You know, for example, it might be worthwhile to keep a list of positive comments, and not just for your resume, but sometimes as a confidence or a morale booster, and for talking points during your interview. And you could go even further and ask yourself, you know, the following questions is, you know, what did you achieve at a job that brought you a sense of pride? What process or task or situation improved as a result of your idea or effort? And again, not just as a resume, but sometimes these are questions asked during an interview. All right, any questions? So we'll go ahead and talk about the education section. So the education section can be placed anywhere on your resume, and I'll talk more about that in just a bit here. It just depends on where you want to highlight your experience in combination with your education. So education section, sometimes it's at the top of resume, sometimes it's at the bottom. You know, sometimes if you're a new graduate, you might include your education section within the first few sections of your resume. If you're more of an established professional with years of experience, your education section might be listed later in your resume with your professional experience and skills preceding your education. Either way, the following are some items to remember when, whenever, or wherever you focus on your educational experience within your resume. So you definitely want to include the name of the institution, the location of that institution, the degree or certification that you earned, and the year of the degree or certification. The year is debatable and perhaps optional. You know, some career experts state not to include it because of many factors, but ultimately it's going to be up to you. And it might depend on the degree. So say if you received a computer science degree in like 1986, you know, what else have you listed that demonstrates that you've kept up with technology trends since 1986? For your education, you definitely want to list all the degrees that you earned. I would leave off high school if you obtained a degree past your high school diploma or an equivalent or a GED. Grade point average or GPA is optional. Basically, if you received anything lower than a 3.0 or a 3.5, I wouldn't necessarily include it within your education section, just the degree that you earned. Definitely include any honors if you received them. But also include postgraduate work, including the topic or thesis, as well as maybe the advisor. And even if you didn't finish a degree, I would still include any completed courses because this can still reflect your commitment, you know, to learning or to illustrate a particular skill within a certain area. I would also include certification and licensing, especially as some industries don't allow you to have the job without those credentials. So like I said, I am also a registered nurse, and I've also received some additional certifications. So I'm going to be sure to not only include that I'm a nurse, but some of those additional certifications that I got, because that will set me apart from other applicants. I also want to mention that it wouldn't hurt to obtain an unofficial your unofficial academic records from any institution. This might be helpful, especially for new graduates who might have, you know, relevant experience from courses, or you just need to know the name of the course. You want to ensure that you not only list it, but you list it out correctly. You know, anybody could easily do a quick search to find the course listing, and you just want to make sure to get it right for credibility. And then here are some additional considerations, areas, and sections that you can maybe add to your resume besides the summary and education and professional experience that I mentioned. So for example, being a leader within a group can showcase more transferable skills such as leadership, teamwork, and organizational skills. These are just the skills that you carry with you, again, regardless of the industry. Lastly, I wanted to discuss professional development. It would be great if you can find a way to state that you're, you know, constantly educating yourself. For example, if you took a recent Coursera course or a LinkedIn learning course, if you have any space on your resume, I would definitely try to incorporate it, especially if it's been a few years since you've obtained the relevant formal education, depending on the field. So say if you work in IT or technology, you know, make sure you are keeping up with some of those standards. not just for a selling point. Sometimes you need it to keep up in those particular fields. I did want to touch on those transferable skills I keep on mentioning. Again, these are the skills that you carry with you regardless of the position or the industry, and not just for your resume. You know, these skills could be discussed and evaluated if you are granted an interview, as I stated earlier. Sometimes people call them essential skills, but these skills can be just as important to an employer as those technical skills. You know, your transferable skills can be included in multiple areas of your resume, but I would always have them ready for your resume or your interview. And this would highlight items related to, you know, communication, teamwork, leadership. So for example, think of how you demonstrated teamwork. You know, how did you work with others? Did you cover any extra shifts for your colleagues? Did you help others when you finished your own duties or your own tasks? Some transferable skills can include your involvement in organizations even outside of your professional circle, if it could positively reflect onto your resume or during that interview. So for example, when it comes to organization, are you involved in a community project, or did you manage your household, especially, you know, when you went to school or focused on your academic work? Did you coach a team or lead the organization at the parent organization at your children's school? For leadership, did you lead any group at let's say a religious organization? Or to bring it back to the professional environment, did you substitute or step in as a leader when a supervisor was unavailable? You know, whenever someone mentions to me that they don't necessarily have certain experiences within a professional capacity, you know, I always suggest they tap into some of their transferable skills. You know, everyone has them. You know, and something that you've done in one role could be transferable to a different job. And, you know, employers are just focused on fulfilling the position. You know, there's not an incentive for them to determine if you're the best candidate. So I really encourage people to tap into some of these skills, because even if you don't have the professional or educational experience, you can attempt to apply those transferable skills. So any questions at this point? Okay, so I did want to show you a couple of resume examples, again, courtesy of Career One Stop, that resource I mentioned earlier. So Michael Jones, we have here, has a one-page resume. And like I said, since there is no right way to write a resume, and I have a lot more access to more templates, but this is what I could successfully put on the screens for you to see. If you reach out to me directly, again, I'll be happy to send those out. You can see here that he's opted to include a summary that is more than one sentence long and hopefully fulfilling what the potential employer is looking for. He has included his education section earlier in the resume. I think I personally would have included more bullet points within the education area, but this isn't a bad looking resume. So we have another example from Krista Brown. She has included a professional summary, and she's focused on accomplishments and qualifications to help, you know, set her apart from other candidates, including some of those transferable skills I mentioned earlier. I also wanted to point out how she included her license information, and that was something that we had discussed earlier. And Krista Brown has a two-page resume, which includes even more accomplishments. I wanted to point out that the professional experience is listed before the education section, probably because it's just more recent. I also want to point out the use of her action words as at the start of each description, like where she states she supported residents with field trips. I would even take it a step further and even use stronger words, if applicable, such as, you know, coordinated and maintained, or even ensured. I would also try to avoid repeating action words. I'm not sure if you could see here, but she's used the word helped a few times. I mean, it's not terrible if you use the same word, but don't try your best not to repeat it over and over again. And let's see here, is there anything else I noticed? But yeah, the action words, again, resume reviewing can be subjective, and something as simple and trivial as certain action words can, you know, not only reflect creativity, but just your efforts as a potential employee. So I would also like the use of industry-specific words that she has here, like gate belts and Hoyer lifts. You know, from my experience as a nurse, I know these equipments are well known in the medical field, especially in nursing, as I've used them myself. But now I'm aware that she might not need as much training and is more job ready than a lot of candidates because she mentions these equipments. And she would actually be more ready to, you know, easily or be ready for designated tasks. So that's another factor to consider here for an employer. Then we finally have John Grant's resume. He has not only included an objective, but a summary of qualification. He's ensured to include the highlights right away. I did want to point out the use of his periods after each description. I know, it's just personal preference. I'm just not a fan of using periods as some of these descriptions. I mean, they're just not complete sentences, but at least he was consistent with how he used them, but that's something else to consider. And then John had 2 pages. I should mention that I would you should also focus on the overall look of the resume and not necessarily, you know, digesting each piece, like I said, because I will forward these. Overall, I like the use of the action words here. I'm just glancing. I do see he used the word developed a few times, so perhaps you can consider some other words, but again, this is not a bad looking resume. I also want to point out the specifics here too, especially the financial mentionings that he has here. I can't say that I'm even familiar with this industry, but the takeaway here is what can you mention that makes you stand out? Stating what you did or your roles and responsibility is important, but your accomplishments is what will make you a viable candidate, but one that will essentially be worthy of an interview and then hopefully a new hire. So any questions at this point? All right. I wanted to mention, of course, some library resources that you can access from home with your library card or a virtual library card. If you don't have a library card, you can visit our website and easily sign up for a virtual library card if you live in Champaign for instant access to these resources. The first is Gale Courses, and it's exactly that. Courses are offered for 6 weeks at a time. It's self-paced, it's self-directed. It offers courses on resumes, professional development courses such as mastering public speaking, resumes and cover letters. It also focuses on technical courses like Microsoft products. If you're familiar with the online learning environment where you would take assessments or you would participate in a discussion forum, it's kind of like that. I've taken Mastering Public Speaking. I think some of my colleagues have taken things like Photoshop and Microsoft Excel, so we all found it very helpful. We offer JobNow, which we frequently use in career services here at the library. JobNow can provide resume and cover letter templates. It has a live chat feature for career or job-related questions, especially about creating your resume. It also has career assessments, but one of the biggest takeaways is that one can upload their cover letter or resume to their resume lab, and an expert will provide feedback about 1 to 2 business days after a document is submitted. And that's something that a lot of library customers have also used. We have LinkedIn Learning, which provides video-based courses on anything, I always say, from computer basics to Adobe software help. In career services, we use it to connect people with, again, cover letter, resume, and professional development courses. I am always taking courses or watching videos on LinkedIn Learning. It's also great because it includes supplemental materials such as templates and examples like resume templates and cover letter templates. And these courses are they're just very helpful at covering all the details related to creating or revising your resume. And then finally, I wanted to mention Peterson's Test Prep. It's a great resource. It offers practice tests. It offers basic math, basic English, all types of resources with this online tool. When I was preparing for my nursing exams, I certainly used this for the practice tests. But just like the JobNow resource I mentioned, this resource also offers great career development tools such as a career assessment, interview assistance. They have a virtual career library that offers modules or tutorials that focus on career changes, from anything from career changes to, of course, resume help. And this resume also has, or this resource also has a great resume builder where you can fill out the field's job application style and just kind of focus on your content instead of the additional formatting piece of resumes. So this is all I have for now. I'm happy to answer any questions. And here's my contact information in case you wanted to reach out or schedule a one-on-one meeting. And we could easily, how we're doing these is we just send you a Zoom link to your email, but we can also chat over the phone, or we can meet via a platform that you're comfortable with, such as Skype. And we don't have to jump in right away. We can just focus on introductions or anything like that. We hope that you'll consider attending more webinars. Our next career webinar will be Your Career Path on February 2nd at 7 p.m., which will be presented by Kevin Martledge, a local career coach, and he'll discuss how to align your career with your personal interests and goals, and develop a career action plan, and just connect with resources to help you reach or at least tap into your career potential. Our next webinar will actually be this Thursday, January 28th at 8 a.m. and that will be Build Your Business Plan, presented by the library's business librarian, Madeline Wolski, and she'll discuss how to create or edit a business plan using some of the library's online resources. And I've went ahead and listed upcoming February career webinars here, but we have a lot more career webinars coming up related to our business series, our tech series, our career series, of course, crafty adults, our writers workshops. And so go ahead and take a look at our events calendar online, champaign.org/events for more information. So yeah, I'm so glad that you could join us for the latest library news and updates. Once again, please visit our website, champaign.org, or you can, of course, follow us on social media if that's an option for you. And as I mentioned before, we are pleased to announce that the library will be reopening on Monday, February 1st for grab-and-go service and computer use. And once again, visit champaign.org for all of the latest updates. And you can email us at librarian@champaign.org. You can chat with us just by visiting the homepage of our website. And we are still offering our Book a Librarian service if you want to meet one-on-one. And I don't see any further questions. So I will go ahead and end this webinar. And I will go ahead and wish everyone a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.